Hello, a Chinese newspaper has accused the U.S. of trying to escalate tensions between China and India. We'll be talking about America's position regarding the subcontinent and why it has kept courting India. And in southwest China, a video of two 14-year-old boys fighting has gone viral. But now police have launched an investigation into the fight club that took them in. And educators asking why they are not at school. We'll be finding out why. Welcome to The Point. I'm Zoe sitting in for Liu Xin. It has been said, as the largest democracy in South Asia, India is more like the U.S. than any other country in that region. According to a Chinese newspaper, Global Times, the U.S. is trying to escalate the Sino-Indian standoff. The article said neither India nor China favor a war, but referred to commentaries in the U.S. media calling on Washington to support India to deter and counter China and rally the world against Beijing. So, what is America's position regarding the South Asia? Does the U.S. see a strategic ally in India, or it wants to send a coded message to China about freedom of navigation? Join me here in the studio is Anar Tangan, and also we'll be joined by Prakash Nanda later on from the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies from New Delhi. So let me start with you, Anar. A Chinese daily, the Global Times, a subsidiary of People's Daily, has accused the U.S. of trying to escalate Sino-Indian standoff and seek strategic benefits. So far, Donald Trump hasn't paid much attention to U.S.-Indian ties. There are divergences on trade and immigrations. Do you think the U.S. is seriously trying to meddle with the China-India conflicts?
Well, if you go back to, there was a 2010 white paper, which has not changed, which laid out the strategy that the U.S. had in Asia. And the main part of that strategy was to use India as a doorstop preventing China's expansion. This has not changed. It's something that appeals to Donald Trump. And certainly, given the situation in Washington right now, he would be desperate to change the conversation that is going on there. Anything to deter, take away the heat from the Russian issue and his lack of ability to push through his domestic agenda.
But I don't believe that Donald Trump's administration wants to be too frontal confrontation with China over the border dispute issue on this, especially considering that China has maintained control over the Donglang area.
Well, what you have is, as usual with Donald Trump, you do not have a fixed policy. You have different voices coming from very, very different areas. Tillerson has repeatedly called to have things settle down. He wants these two giants to come to some sort of terms, which, short of any kind of conflict, which would be bad for business worldwide and for both countries. But then you hear other voices, the Steve Bannons of the world, who would like nothing more to see China engaged in some sort of long-term conflict with one of its neighbors. He whole narrative was about how China and the U.S. would come to military conflict at some point in the future, and enlisting allies like India in this part of this would be an important part of how he sees the world.
And if there is a military conflict between China and India over the border, do you think the Americas would really send his soldiers to come to the aid of India?
Well, it's very unlikely at this point, given that in the U.S., this has not hit the headlines. This is not a hot-button topic. People are not feeling in any way that this was a situation where the U.S. needs to get involved. With more troops already going into Afghanistan and into the Middle East, with uncertainties abounding, it is not the time to start another war on another front. On the other hand, something low level where the U.S. can sit back and watch these two neighbors expend their energies and take away from their economic abilities would, of course, be very, very fine with Donald Trump and his view of America first.
So Donald Trump's administration wants to be subtle if it wants to aid India in any way. How do you think China should respond? to this?
Well, I don't, first off, as I keep saying, there are different voices within the Trump administration who are saying different things, so it's very difficult to pin down exactly what Donald Trump thinks. Obviously, Steve Bannon and Tillerson are on the opposite ends of this particular dispute. So it's not clear how things will go forward from here. It has not hit obviously has not hit the newspaper pages in the United States simply because it's been monopolized by everything that's going on with the domestic agenda and with Russia.
But India wants to cozy up to the United States, obviously. Last month, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with Trump in Washington, and Trump described the relationship, according to him, as never been stronger, never been better. The apparently jovial tone was in contrast to what has been predicted to be a tough meeting because there are many differences between India and U.S., especially over IPR protection, trade, and immigration. So what is your general assessment of U.S.-India relations, despite many of the obstacles I mentioned?
Well, it's very odd. I mean, Modi did not really get anything in return for voicing the support. And if you start looking at the dates of this particular incident between China and India, it was in progress at that point, and Modi had an opportunity to either withdraw his troops or continue. It seems that he is intent on showing the U.S. that he's willing to be the, quote, doorstop to Chinese expansion. But for what benefit? Everybody is scratching their head to understand what the exit strategy is or the long-term goal that India can get from this type of situation. Destabilization will not help India in terms of its growth. There's not going to be any dollars being sent by Washington to Delhi to help with their much-needed infrastructure. On the other hand, China has been holding out an open hand, both on everything from SCO to the Belt and Road Initiative, saying and offering money towards infrastructure, which is badly needed. So people are still trying to figure out exactly what India expects for this. Now, on the other hand, it is true that as China expands, not necessarily on a military basis, but the fact is, just sheer economics, China is encroaching into what India sees as their primary historical areas of influence. And this is having a big effect in terms of their pride. They feel themselves being kind of overwhelmed by their larger Chinese neighbor.
So what exactly did Modi get from Donald Trump in terms of security? Just a moral support or more substantive support?
Well, he got nothing. He got the right to buy more American arms, which I don't necessarily see as a benefit. Maybe he does. I mean, right now, India's military situation is a ragtag. They have Russian jets, they have French submarines, they have some American materials, they have stuff from Israel. It's kind of a ragtag collection of things, but they are a very big buyer in the world market. Donald Trump wanted that, he got it, but the question is, why didn't Modi get something? There was no give on the issue of visas for tech people from India. It's a big, big issue in India. It's been a growth market for them. There was not one single nice word said about it. In fact, Donald Trump doubled down and said, no, we won't be doing that anytime soon.
And let's get some Indian perspective. We're joined by Prakash Nanda from the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies in New Delhi. Mr. Nanda, we're talking about India-US relations. What do you think India get from improved relationship with the U.S. when Mr. Modi visited Washington?
You see, when one talks of India and the United States relations, they are in a multi-pronged. You can't straitjacket the relationship strictly in military terms, in the sense that India is one of the largest buyers of the American arms, which factually speaking is not substantial at all. For instance, whatever people may say, but the cold statistics suggest that over the last 10 years, India at the most must have or would have bought American arms worth 20 to 25 billion dollars. And as I am saying, this is in the higher term. The statistics maybe actually little lower than that. But if you
India
recall,
didn't get any
only
concessions
last
from
month,
the U.S. on trade,
Saudi Arabia,
immigration, apart from that military
no, my
equipment
point is
deal.
that, as I said, the India, yes, I said that India-US relations are basically can be divided into 5 components in my opinion. One is defense relationship, one is government to government relationship, one is in the relationship between Bangalore and the IT as well as their Silicon Valley, and then one is the Indian students and the American universities. Let's face it, Indian students comprise a substantial number of their elite universities. And the most important thing is this: the Indian diaspora, the people of Indian origin, they may be smaller in number, but they near 2 million now in the United States, but they are among the richest. I think according to a latest survey, the Indian Americans happen to be among their largest and richest communities in the United States.
But they
So
haven't
obviously
translated into
have
political leverages in changing Donald Trump's policy regarding immigration and trade, has it?
Yes. I think, as I said, that this is a question of Donald Trump. In any case, a presidency cannot be judged just in its when it is in office only for 3 years, 4 months. So this is a continuous dialogue. And if you ask the Indian government, they say, their spokespersons say that it is not that bad as the situation or the reports do suggest. In fact, only 15 days back, the Americans gave the Indians that concession that when they go to America, in their airports, they will be getting quicker and faster clearance. So as I said that the IT, it is not a question. It is obviously it is not a zero-sum game.
I want to come to the
problems,
military
course,
part of this, because obviously China and India is now in a standoff over the border issue. The U.S. offered for Indians a consideration of the sale of what we call Sea Guardian unmanned air ecosystem. That's obviously a reconnaissance system. Could this mark the first step of U.S.-India improved military relationship that is eyeing China in this part?
Well, I see the reconnaissance planes that you are talking of, they are meant for the Indian Navy. And then when one talks of these reconnaissance planes, so it is not a new development. I think 7, 8 years back, India really had their first this thing. So it is a continuation of the process. It has nothing to do with Modi government as such. It is a continuation of the policy that the previous Manmohan Singh government had taken. These reconnaissance planes are not something very, very new. They were there. India had bought them. I think way back in 2012, a couple of them. So now the more numbers have been that conclusion, that deal has been, or there has been agreement to buy more of them. The point is that when one talks of defense, then what the Modi government and their the Americans come in a big way. They want that the American military systems to be produced in India, which is in continuity with Modi's Make in India policy. Well, so in that sense, they are bargaining, like Lockheed. They say that they can manufacture their F-16 planes there in India itself. It is not only meant for India. From India, they can sell it to
India
other
wants
countries.
to produce its own weapons in India. Of course, the United States has problem with that. So, NR, what do you make of the nature of U.S.-India military relationship is just a purchase of weapons, or there will be step-up cooperation like manufacture of weapons and more strategic cooperation?
Well, the strategic cooperation may explain some of it. This nationalism that's going on with the Modi government is very clearly just trying to stand up and say, look, India will not be the sick man of Asia. We're going to protect everything that is ours. We will make sure that China does not overtake Sri Lanka or any of these other possessions. The difficulty that you have here is that China and India historically never had a border. And then, because of the vicissitudes of various colonial governments, they suddenly did, and they've been put up against each other. There are no historical precedents. There's only a lot of old paper where it said, here's the line, there's the line, and those are things. So it is difficult. It would be better if these two neighbors were to sit down and figure out what the issue is, rather than turning to a third party who is intent on destabilizing Asia for their own interests.
To tap into the old wisdoms of the two old nations. We're running out of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Prakashananda from the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, and also N.R. Tongden, our current affairs commentator. And here is my first point. Over the last 7 decades, the relationship between the U.S. and India has been a story of both differences and cooperation. The end of the Cold War and the disintegration of the Soviet Union changed the world geopolitics and the mindset of the U.S. and India towards one another. Every year, leaders of the two countries met one another, and the recent visit of Narendra Modi to the U.S. has further cemented this relationship. But some people criticize the recent joint ventures between the two, arguing the current leaders lack world vision and mostly unaware of the international power structure. Whether they agree or not, nothing, as they say, lasts forever. And it will be interesting to see which way the wind blows in the coming months and years as the power balance in Asia shifts with fast-growing China. And now we head to Sichuan province in southwestern China, where a 6-minute video showing two 14-year-old boys from a mixed martial arts club in the city of Chengdu went viral. Well, the video depicts their daily life, their training and competing in cage fights. It received more than 13 million views, and on Chinese Twitter-like platform Weibo, hashtag MMA Orphan has been read over 1.6 million times. While the boys were among the 400 orphans or left behind children whose parents work in other cities training in the club. Well, police have already launched an investigation into the fight club, and education officials announced Tuesday they will send at least 2 orphans back to school. So, is this mere exploitation or another opportunity for the kids to grow up? What happens when they head back to school? To get to the bottom of this controversy surrounding the video and the club, I'm joined in Beijing by Fu Jun, professor from National School of Development in Peking University, and also Cao San, author of The Dollar Apocalypse. Mr. Fu, first of all, let's talk about this controversy. What is the controversy is really about? It seems people are talking about the kids going to the fight club. Is it a good choice for them or not? Or do they have a choice over their future? What do you think is the major controversial part of this issue?
Well, I think there are 2 dimensions to the controversy. One is that there is a concern about whether or not the kids are being exploited commercially. After all, we are talking about underage people here. The other is about the legality of this organization.
The 2 boys we mentioned actually are orphans. They were sent by the Civil Affairs Bureau to the fight club, and the fight club boss said it is totally legal to adopt them in this way.
Well, this is sort of murky to begin with. That's why there are reports that the investigation is going on. Normally, if we do things according to the current framework of regulations, if you have an orphan, then the state should take subsidy of that orphan. But of course, the state would authorize some organizations such as the case of SOS Village here in China, who also would raise orphans, but that organization is authorized by the Civil Affairs department, from the central government to provincial government all the way to the county level. But is it an individual official at the local level, or it's an organization that have go through a proper procedure to authorize that an organization is a matter of investigation?
I read many comments online about this story. Some commentators say, well, this is actually good for those kids because they live in poverty-stricken areas. There is no better life for them except to be adopted by an institution like that. The problem is this is a fighting club. What do you think of their choices?
Well, I think there's some validity to that argument because I think these private institutions are doing a good job of taking care of these kids by providing them with clothing and...
A good job? What's the definition of a good job? Because they were trained very hard and fight very hard.
Well, that's
choice... why many people say this is...
I know, but the choice is
unacceptable.
But the choice is made voluntarily. Nobody is forcing these kids to come here. They have the choice to quit if they don't think that...
Do they have the choice to quit? Because they don't have much of a choice. They're living in a very poor area and poor family. They're without parents. There's no guardian to take care of them.
Well, if they don't have any choice, then at least the fighting club is providing them with a choice to live their life. But the point is that they're not forced to stay there. They have the choice to leave and maybe get some labor.
Actually, they enjoy their life there.
Exactly.
They like fighting. Exactly. And they like to be taken care of.
Exactly. And when you see the interview, they're talking about how they want to fight one day in a UFC competition, and they're training very hard. It seems like they feel like it actually provides them with a better alternative than be just left on the street with no ambition, no goals, and nobody's thinking about that these private institutions are not funded by the government. They have to find a way to survive. They have to find a way to generate profits, and if they don't have these promotional shows where they make some type of money.
By using kids to fight, this is immoral, don't you think?
But that's how they train. It's like if you practice martial arts, you would also fight, and it teach kids self-reliance. It teach them, how to train hard. It teach them self-discipline. It bestow a lot of virtues to them. Compare them with some, 14-year-olds, who just play with toys and live off of their parents and be like a flower, staying at home. I think they will come out with a better...
The sad thing is they don't have a much of choice.
There is a critical difference when you are dealing with the people, whether that group of people is adults above the age of 18 or it's underaged person. For an underaged person, for a modern state, if you're orphaned, the state have to take the custody. The state, in various ways, probably...
But the reality is only 1/5 of those orphans in this country are taken care of by government institutions.
Well, then the issue is the state need to hurry up the process of authorizing, going through the eligibility process to let those NGOs to take of that. But for an organization to be eligible to provide compulsory education as part of citizenship training, in the case of China, it's 9-year education, that institution must have the capability to provide the minimum level of those education. And if not, that education, they should send kids to schools. And for those 9-year public education, it's free of charge. And those orphanages should take care of the life aspects of those kids. But they should make a distinction not to confuse the two parts. It's the education part.
And do you think those children, they're 14, 15 years old, they should have a choice about their life? Now they were sent back to schools under the help of the local authorities and education authorities. But probably they would rather spend their life
individual's
in
choice,
such a fight club.
sort of individual's freedom for a modern state will have to make a distinction between adults and underaged person. Underaged person, they do not have a free hand to choose for lack of knowledge, for lack of education.
And the understanding about the fight club, according to ESPN, in the U.S., 3.2 million children of 13 are now joining the MMA, and kids can start their classes as early as 6 years old. So it seems it's a different culture in the U.S. to encourage children to be trained in fighting and martial arts than here in China.
Yeah, I think people in the West generally are more open-minded about these type of activities. They view it as one of many different sports, just like soccer or baseball. You train your kids at a very young age. And coming back to Professor Hu's point, not everybody's cut out to be a scientist, to be an author or a professor. Some people, they might just want to be a soldier or a security guard one day. And this type of training lays the right foundation for them. It gives them the discipline, it gives them skills to be a contributing member of society. Just sending them back to school to learn more arithmetic may not be the best choice.
You think, Mr. Fu?
Well, if you want to be trained in mixed martial arts, you can do that during spare time, but the bulk of your time should be spent for education. And this is what I would call a modern state is all about, compulsory education for the younger generation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Fu, and thank you, Cao Zhang, for your analysis on this. And now here's my last point. Many have argued that learning to fight from a young age offers a way out for the future and gives the kids a better life than they would have if they had stayed at home or gone to school. Where would they go otherwise, after all? At least this way they can rely on this to make a living and become professional athletes, hopefully. But others are not so convinced that the MMA club has the children's best interests at heart, with some calling it a form of abuse. Many argue that they should be at school and yet have entered into a profit-driven world. It's a sad thing. So what is being implanted into them is the rules of survival mean that the winner takes all. The problem of left-behind children in China is one that is no easy answer, and the story of the Fight Club only muddies the water. I'll leave you to make up your minds as to which side you want to take. And this is this edition of The Point. As always, you can always follow us on Twitter or visit our Facebook page using the handle @ThePoint with Liu Xin. I'm Zhou in Beijing. Goodbye.